Okay, good morning and welcome to the BTEC Tech Award in Music Practice support session. So just very quickly at the beginning, just a quick update on performance measures. So both the BTEC First Award and the Music Tech Award in Music Practice were included on 2020 performance measures. The DFE confirmed that all qualifications included on 2020 measures would be included on 2021 and 2022 performance measures. But there is a little caveat to that the DFE reserves the right to remove any qualification from the performance tables lists if it has evidence to indicate that the qualification doesn't meet the characteristics or if there's wider policy changes. At the moment, obviously both First Award and Tech Award will count on performance measures moving forward for 2021 and 2022. And in light of that change in performance measures, the BTEC First Award has had its final registration date and certification date changed and extended. So the First Award in Music now has final registration date of 31st December 2021 and final certification as 31st December 2023. Okay. So a quick overview of the BTEC Tech Award changes really and the differences between that and the First Award. So a big change is the structure with there's 3 mandatory components in the Tech Award, but they are quite flexible in terms of the way you can approach them. So obviously with the First Award you had some core units and then some optionality in terms of the skills units that you delivered. This has mandatory components, but there's flexibility within those components to allow you to how you deliver those and what you can focus on. So there is no exam in the Tech Award. Obviously there is an external assessment, but this is a task-based assessment and is focused on the skills that the learners will develop over the course as well. There's graded level 1 outcomes for the qualification overall, and this means that in terms of performance points that students can achieve from the qualification, it's more beneficial as in the First Award you had the level 1 fallback, which just worked out to 1.25 performance points. With the graded level 1s in the Tech Award, it starts to marry up a little better with the 9:1 grading of the new GCSEs. So level 1 pass in the Tech Award is 1.25 performance points. The merit is 2, and then the distinction is 3 at level 1. So you can see that that meets up with the GCSE performance points a little better, and then obviously from level 2, a level 2 pass is 4 performance points, and then it moves up to 5.5 for a merit. I believe it's 7 for a distinction, and then 8.5 for a distinction star. So the performance points are a wider choice of those that students can achieve, which works out better in terms of performance measures there. Component 1 is exploring the music products and styles. I ran a session on this last week. The main focus of it is about exploring different musical styles and the key features of those, and exploring instrumental techniques as well that are associated with styles. This brings in a little bit of music theory to be able to explain the techniques and the features and the musical elements as well. The main thing that we'll be focusing on today is component 2, which is the music skills development. And this has 2 learning aims, one which is focused on developing the personal and professional skills associated with the music industry, and then the learning aim B, which is about developing individual music skills across a couple of the disciplines within the course. And then there is component 3, which is responding to a commercial music brief. This is the external assessment. So learners will look at how to respond to a brief, and then also about selecting and applying the music skills that are appropriate to respond to that brief as well. There's a sample assessment material for that on the website, which in the sample assessment material there's a couple of options. One is based around performing and creating, and the second option is based around production and creating. So learners essentially in the sample assessment material have to select a piece of music, and there's a list of 10 songs in the brief, and create a version of it in a particular style, and there's 4 styles listed in the brief as well. So they would have to create a version of that, so either through performing or production, and the creating part across both of those is using the knowledge of the different styles and the musical elements to create their own stylistic version of that piece. So looking at component 2 in a bit more detail and some possible approaches. So really going through it, learning aim A investigates the music industry skills that are key across all disciplines. So in the first component, even though you can tailor it to be more of a production course for your students, or more of a performance course for your students, or more of a composing course, as a matter of fact, this unit starts off by looking across all those 3 skills again: the performing, creating and production, in terms of the professional skills. And then later on in learning aim B is where they will start to focus on 2 out of those 3 as well. So in the assessment and through their learning, learners have to produce evidence around time management, self-discipline, working with others, correct and safe use of equipment, resources, how to audit skills and plan for development, and how to respond appropriately to feedback and act upon that as well. And the majority of this work would want to be taken through practical workshops, okay, and allow the learner to generate that evidence, naturally doing these things in the class as well. So the learner must show evidence across all 3 disciplines, but aren't required to demonstrate the skills for all 3. So they wouldn't necessarily, if they're more production students, have to perform in this unit, in this component, but they would have to be aware of the the skills and the professional and personal skills associated with that. So, as I said, it's being encouraged that workshops will form an important part of the evidence here, alongside things like videos of reflection, so the students can show their understanding of the skills and reflect on that and show how they're taking that into consideration. So short clips of video interviews and just a short reflective journal type entry would start to cover that. Teacher observations as well, obviously, will form a good part of the evidence for this component, as you'll be observing the learners actually demonstrating these skills within the workshops or the groups that they're working in. And also be about looking at case studies, so looking at practitioners in the industry and looking at how they work within the music industry and show these skills as well. So there's a few different ways that we're looking at the evidence that would be produced for the component here. And the intention is for taught sessions to be followed by practical sessions to allow learners to demonstrate the skills. So what we would want is sessions where you would obviously go through the skills and the behaviours that are expected in the music industry, and then in practical sessions this would then allow the learners to actually demonstrate those skills as well. So we are expecting learners to be practically engaged with tasks around performing, creating and production, depending on which ones you're focusing on more for your learners to demonstrate those skills. And then learners must demonstrate responding to feedback to achieve the higher grades in the learning aim. As it says, this could form part of observation records as well. So your observation records about the learner responding to the feedback that they've been given would obviously allow them to start achieving the higher grades at this learning aim. Learners must also look at how musicians communicate their work to others across performing, creating and production. So they would need to look at methods of capturing musical development, and then approaches to clear and organised communication and how to share and comment on work professionally. So this is where you might want students to start looking at different social media aspects. So having a web page or a blog or a vlog or something like that set up around how musicians communicate that, and then also looking at things like using Facebook, SoundCloud, and Bandcamp and all sorts of things like that, and how musicians will communicate their work with others as well. Obviously YouTube would come into that as well. Now I know that on school network systems that can sometimes be a problem because students don't always have access to those, as IT tend to lock those down quite heavily. However, most IT systems within schools would allow you some flexibility in that and allow certain learners to access certain things at certain times. So it might be worth having a conversation with your IT support to see what can be done with those sorts of things if there are problems as well. So moving on to Learning Aim B in a minute. Just pause there really for a second and see if there's any questions coming in around Learning Aim A. So if you do have any questions, type them into the chat box, or you can raise your hand and I can unmute as well. Okay, so there's been a question about exemplar work really soon for this unit. Still unclear on the type of work students might submit. Okay, so there will be some sample mark learner work coming for this component. I had a discussion with the team producing that the other week, and they have said hopefully by April there should be the sample mark learner for this component as well. We have had lots of new qualifications for music actually over this last year, and producing the sample mark learner work has taken a little more time than expected. But yeah, it's hoped that sample mark learner work for this, and then other resources like authorised assignment briefs for the new level 3 as well will be coming around April time. I know that the material is being produced at the moment and being looked at by various team members to make sure that it meets all the requirements as well. And so yeah, so in the next few weeks, and if it's not available by sort of mid to late April, I can obviously follow this up for everyone as well. Okay, could I give an example of the type of practical task students could undertake to meet the evidence? Okay, well, with the types of practical task, it would be really like the workshop type things of working on material to do with performance or composing or production. So if I just go back to these slides here. So the intention with it is that you will be delivering some taught sessions around the sort of professional skills and working on those. But in the practical sessions, it really is around about having learners work on, you know, they might want to perform it in, you might set up a session where they're performing in a group. And so you can evidence things like time management there, because if they're prepared coming to the rehearsal, they've obviously covered things like the time management there. They're preparing themselves with sufficient time, they're turning up on time, they're using their time well. That would also cover things like self-discipline, because they've prepared themselves before the session as well. Obviously working in a group, they're working with others, and able to demonstrate communication there as well. And obviously correct safe use of equipment and things like that. So the expectation is that the evidence that's generated is really just going through the types of practical tasks that you would normally do with them in terms of, you know, group performances, so maybe solo performances, and they might undertake a remix task if they're looking at more of a production route as well, or composing a piece of music as well. They might do a little a short composition as well. So there's various different options in terms of the work that they're doing practically that will then generate the evidence around those skills as well, because then they can demonstrate that. Just going through a couple of the other comments. You don't have to perform as such, but it is worth students selecting material to perform in order to give them something to focus on in order to log their rehearsal time. Time management. Yeah. So yes, so they don't have to perform, and you don't have to have them working in performance workshops. You can use the creating and production as the main focus there as well. But as you say, it would be useful as well for students to be able to do those sorts of things and just be used to working with others, maybe in a performance environment. Could part of the evidence for learning aim A be a generic form they fill in after each practical session, like a learning journal log answering each of the areas that need evidence? So you could produce some sort of document in terms of a log where learners will fill certain bits in. I think that obviously audio video evidence is really useful for a lot of this as well, because it's then the learner demonstrating those skills on video, and you're not having to trawl through pages of journals and logs and things like that as well, which I think can be really useful. But as I said, your observations as well can feed into this and give the evidence around some of these things as well. So you can log how learners are working on particular material, are demonstrating, the time management side of it, or the correct and safe use of equipment as well. So yes, I think it can be useful to have some sort of a log or something like that. And in learning aim B as well, it's certainly encouraged to have something, but again, we're moving down the sort of blog vlog type route a little more with encouraging those sorts of things. And again, there's no reason why in learning aim A as well there can't be some sort of blog or vlog to demonstrate these skills and their development as well. So I hope that answers your question in the types of evidence that can be produced there as well. Okay, so if we move on to learning aim B, this allows learners to demonstrate their skills across 2 disciplines. And thinking about the types of skills and the types of things that would be covered in this are probably more like the optional skills units that you would cover in the first award, because it is about developing those skills, and you can then focus that on 2 disciplines. So it's again being encouraged that in the teaching all 3 disciplines are covered and should be encouraged to allow learners to decide on the best 2 for them to focus on individually. Now obviously, you will have cohorts where there is a particular focus, and that's where you would probably move your teaching towards anyway. But obviously it's being encouraged to leave it open, but your cohorts will generally have a particular focus on in terms of what they would like to cover anyway, I think. Assessment should take place over a long period of time. I know in the authorised assignment brief, I believe it says over 2 terms. And that's to allow the learners the opportunity to show improvement on a range of skills as well. So we are looking at this being a long period of time for this assessment in here. And it will start off with learners actually doing a skills audit for their chosen 2 disciplines and creating a development plan of how they are going to improve those skills over time. So in the teaching phase of this, obviously you can cover how to do skills audits and looking at creating those development plans, and this is where looking at case studies can be really useful as well. So learners will be developing those skills there, and then so they have to create that plan to develop their skill across the 2 disciplines, and then it's around the learner providing the practical evidence for that as well. And certainly, again, it's around audio and audio-visual evidence as appropriate to what skills they're developing. So if it's more performance-based, the expectation would be that the majority of evidence there would be video-based, whereas if it is more the creating sort of task, obviously that leans more towards being audio-based. But there's certainly nothing wrong with if they're doing production things, having audio-visual type stuff where, say, learners are doing screen captures when they're actually working on bits of work. So both Mac and PC can have things where it will capture the screen whilst the student is working on that, and they can talk their way through what they're doing on the screen to demonstrate the skills that they're developing as well. And then it says, again, learners should be encouraged to keep a blog, vlog, diary to evidence development over the assessment. So again, we would be expecting students to be keeping their evidence of audio and video evidence and building that up over time through a blog, vlog, diary type thing. Just had a question come in. Will an exemplar skills audit development plan be released, or are we expected to create our own template? I don't know of a plan to have a pro forma for the skills audit or the development plan. But in the sample mark learner work, when that becomes available, obviously there will be an example of work in there with that sort of thing. But I don't know of any plan to release a specific pro forma for the skills audit development plan. There are various different ones available online as well that you can access. When I used to teach, I was mainly teaching the level 3, but again, we covered skills audits and development plans in that across several of the units that I delivered, and I used a fairly basic template for learners there, but obviously other learners would take that on and develop their plans as appropriate there as well. But obviously, so there's no plans to particularly produce that at the moment. In the assessment evidence as well, learners must include at least 6 milestone recordings. So this is to show the development of the skills over time as well. So the recordings, again, can be audio, can be video, depending on the types of skills that are being covered. And the recordings of those can be made in or out of the centre, and there is no need for the teacher to be present for those recordings as well. So the learner can produce those 6 milestone recordings and evidence their skills. There's just another question come in. All right, thinking students would audit their overall skills in the 2 disciplines chosen. Piece of work in these areas whilst keeping a log recordings showing them meeting or improving the targets they have set. An example of a skill they may work on. Okay, so yes is kind of an answer to part of that query. So yes, they'd look at their overall skill within the 2 disciplines, and obviously write where they're currently at and make a development plan for improving that over the period of time, and make the recordings showing that development over that period of time as well. So what skills that can be covered it can be so varied depending on what they're focusing on. But if they are, for example, I'm trying to think of an example here. So if they are a drummer and they are performing, they may want to look at performing certain rudiments at certain tempos and building tempo and speed into their playing. So that can be evidenced through them practicing certain skills and practicing the rudiments with a click track and developing that tempo over time as well. You could, if they're more of a production student, you could look at their audio editing skills, for example. So if they are editing recordings, they can demonstrate the skills of editing the sound files so that there's no clicks and pops at the start or end of the recording, and they can show how they've worked on that as well. Also, you could work on things like mastering type techniques as well. There and working on using certain effects and compression and all sorts of things like that as well. I have lots of singers mostly in my group, so perhaps work on breathing control, tone projection, etc. Yeah, exactly those sorts of things. So it would be covering the skills that you might expect to see in more individual instrumental lessons, for example, as well, that would allow them to develop their skill on their instrument as well. So, so the milestone recordings must show the development, including some starting points. Sorry, just another question come in. Is there a graded level students should be aiming to perform at? Some students working around grade 3, 4, others only just preliminary. There's no specific grade to be working at for the qualification, because generally in terms of performing, BTEC looks at different things other than just being a specific grade. It is about communication to the audience and communicating with other musicians as well, and so it's not just being about playing at a particular level. Obviously, it should be generally appropriate for the course level that they are at as well, so level 1, 2. But we certainly wouldn't specify a specific grade with the BTEC. But if they are performing very simple pieces, obviously that can then impact on the skills that they are showing. So it may then limit the grade that could be achieved depending on the criteria and what's actually being said there as well. So the milestone recordings must show development, including starting points. So what we would be expecting is recording very near the beginning of the work that they are doing, depending on the skill, and then throughout that process, some other recordings as they are developing those skills as well. You can give feedback to learners to act upon, and that's part of the assessment in this as well. But it's not intended that the feedback is like formative feedback, confirming grades that their work that they would be meeting, for example. But it's envisaged that it would be more technical musical feedback, so you can give them the feedback about how to improve their musical skills, and look at those sorts of things. Someone's just asked, could milestone recordings be milestone scores for the composing creating discipline? Yeah, so with creating, that could certainly be an example of just an idea, a starting point for a composition, and then having examples of that score as it develops through the process as well. So yeah, certainly using scores in there would be fine, or if they're working on Sibelius, for example, having just the audio from that recorded down at certain points as well. But obviously, with compositions, scores are quite useful to look at as well, depending on that what their type of composition that is. Okay, so as I said, yeah, you can give feedback in terms of the technical musical skill side of things as they're working their way through this learning aim as well. But obviously you would be focusing on giving them feedback around the grades that they're working towards and could possibly achieve there. So at this point, it's really opening it up to any further questions that you have, and just see if there's any more questions there. Okay, just going back to Learning Aim A, how long would you allow for the assignments for Component 2 Learning Aim A? Okay, to sufficiently cover those skills, I think it needs to be over a fairly long period of time again, maybe a couple of months or so to really allow learners to demonstrate all of those skills and react on feedback as they're going through that as well. So I think that a couple of months in there to allow learners to really demonstrate that all those skills across the disciplines that you're looking at, and would be a reasonable length of time for that. I hope that answers your question there. Okay, just seeing if there's any more questions. So can evidence for learning aim A be part of learning aim B? I think with that, it depends how you write the assignment. Now, with the authorised assignment briefs online, they are two separate assignments, and you can set those at different times. And obviously, the way that assessment rules work for BTEC is that generally you can't use any evidence for an assessment that's produced before the assessment is set. The evidence has to be generated after you've set the assignment. So you could run those together. In fact, when I was looking at the component as well, part of my thinking was possibly that you could combine an assignment for learning aim A and learning aim B, and demonstrate all of those skills and the development of that over a long period of time, and alongside each other. So if you write an assignment that covers both learning aims, I think it is possible to evidence learning aim A with a lot of the material that can be produced for learning aim B as well. So yes, I think it's possible. I think it just depends about how you set the assignments out, and how the evidence is then generated. Okay, just see if there's any further questions. Okay, doesn't look like there's any more questions coming in. My screen's just frozen for a second, so hopefully there's no more questions. No, that looks like it. So all I'll say is thank you very much for attending. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you can deliver the component when you come to that. Some of you may be moving into that quite soon, so I hope you found this useful. Thank you very much.